You owe us. You owe us should be the coat of arms or the motto of every narcissistic family out there. You owe us. No, don't owe you anything. When you have a child, the child owes you nothing. This is an interesting one. This person's asking, am I the asshole for how I reacted when my husband threw away our daughter's kitchen tools that I bought for her? Okay, so that already seems like a bizarre start. So this person says that her daughter, who's 15 years old, loves cooking. She began discovering new meals after she became vegan, and this daughter was a very picky eater in the past. The mom encourages her to cook her own food, but my husband hates it, although she still sits at the table with us. But he thinks that her having different food on the table is disrespectful to the family, and she should just be eating what we eat. Okay, so holy authoritarianism. I thought that was ridiculous and asked him to just let her be. True. He got more agitated, bad sign, and said that the daughter wasn't allowed to use any tool in our kitchen if she decides to cook for herself, since he paid for everything the kitchen has. Controlling through money. Again, a very authoritarian kind of move. I fought back on his decision, but he stood firm. Kitchen tools, folks, ain't nothing too small for these folks to try to control, right? I decided to just go out and buy her all the tools she needed to make her meals. She buys her own groceries, so I don't have to worry about that. So a 15-year-old child having to buy her own groceries, and the controlling father won't even let her use a damn spatula. Last night, I was out, and my daughter called me crying, saying my husband threw away all the tools I got her to prevent her from cooking. Not okay. I was fuming. I went home and started arguing with him, telling him those weren't his tools. He argued that the daughter was cooking in his kitchen and he already didn't authorize that. So this is what that parental narcissistic abuse looks like, by the way. I blew off and went off on him, telling him he's ridiculous, and he was just looking for excuses to prevent our daughter from cooking. He yelled that our daughter is acting spoiled. By the way, this is a girl who's buying her own groceries because her controlling father won't even do that. He yelled that the daughter is acting spoiled and that I repeatedly let her disrespect us and the table manners by letting her cook her own food instead of being grateful and eating what's already on the table. Control. Again, then this actually has a lot of coercive control elements to it too. We fought some more, then I went upstairs. He followed me saying I'm avoiding responsibility and that I'm encouraging the daughter to become selfish and egotistical instead of appreciating what's in front of her. So there's projection, because that's what this dad is. Selfish, egotistical, controlling, projecting that onto the portrayal of the child. I refused to talk to him, and he said I should apologize. Narcissists love telling the other person to apologize. He said I should apologize for reacting by yelling at him and calling him names. Fragile ego, hypersensitivity, all there. So this is a problem. And I feel so much for this daughter having to grow up with a father like this, because you can imagine the downstream effects there are going to be. So some people had some questions that that were raised by this scenario. So interesting, this woman has weighed in. And they said, why? Some people asked questions, so she's clarifying. She said, why does this woman let her daughter buy her own groceries? This lady says 2 reasons. One is that she uses the money I give her to buy groceries. So she's actually, the mom's providing the grocery money. And 2 is that she knows what she needs to cook her meals and has more knowledge with vegan products, so she shops by herself. And sometimes I take her with me if it's a new place. So mom is, it's still mom's providing the grocery money, the daughter's getting her own food. Number 2, is there a cultural factor? She says, we're from Latin America and my husband's the sole provider for the family. I'm sorry. I don't care where you are from the world. If you're behaving in a controlling manner, that's just not good for anybody. Number 3, why can't the whole family eat vegan? And she said, because I have younger kids and they don't eat vegetables. Okay? This is, again, it is a very... I think for me, this was actually an interesting sort of a triggery one, because I grew up in a home where a lot of the narcissistic abuse happened around the dinner table. And it actually, I'm still messed up about food to this day. And my preferred way to eat ironically, is alone, because I get very tense when I have to eat with other people. Like, and I'm very old now. So to tell you, after all those years, the tension created about food and washing dishes and clearing the table and being obedient at the dinner table messed me up permanently. So first of all, I really feel for this people's daughter. The authoritarianism, the control, my food, my house, my rules. It sets up so many vulnerabilities in a child who will either be at risk for finding someone like this and repeating the cycle again, or living in absolute anxiety. It's complete invalidation. The daughter has found a style she wants to eat in. Many people embrace veganism for a variety of reasons, from ethical to personal to taste to whatever. And I think that that kind of choice by a child is something that can be respected. She's even offering to, this guy is screaming around how his daughter is entitled. And the daughter is actually saying, I'll cook my own meals. It's not like she's saying, I'll only eat a vegan meal. She's picking through the food at the table. She's actually cooking her own meal, rolling up, following the dad's abusive dinner table tradition, and sitting there and being abused with him at the table. And then to show that kind, instead of talking about it, right? So this is what we see in these kinds of really abusive, toxic, narcissistic family systems. And instead of even making it a conversation, this person throws the utensils away. So not only does it show just absolute disrespect to the mother, so the father is showing disrespect to the mother because she spent money to buy those kitchen tools, is showing the daughter that she has no validity in her father's eyes either, which is also completely unacceptable kind of a sort of a structure. Then the father turns around and is yelling at the mother for not taking responsibility and calling her reactive. So it doesn't seem like anybody can win in this family system. And the fact is, nobody can. Mom is stuck in a toxic marriage. Daughter is an adolescent who now has this difficult toxic father. And the other kids are going to have to deal with their own forms of emotional abuse from this father as they grow up. This idea of the toxic authoritarian father, no one in the world can convince me there's any utility to this parenting model. Nobody has ever come out of that parenting model intact or healthy. They either come out as authoritarian and abusive themselves, they come out as deeply anxious, they come out feeling socially anxious. There's just it doesn't do anyone any favors. And again, I will tell you, like, making it around food, which is such a primal everyday need, is something that's very, very classical in these narcissistic relationships. And I paid for the food, and I paid for this. So this idea that for the narcissistic parent, that things become very transactional. Again, I don't know if the father is narcissistic, certainly toxic, controlling, authoritarian, emotionally abusive. So maybe the word narcissistic isn't right as much as it is all of these really, really unhealthy dynamics. And then turning the relationship into something transactional. I paid for all of this. I bought your absolute obedience. Never, never healthy. I'll tell you that again, in many, many people I have worked with, the dinner table and the dinner hour or the meal times was one of the more toxic experiences. It was an opportunity for whoever the most abusive, controlling family member is, often a father, could also be a mother, but whoever that person was, to really hold court and menace everyone else in the family system. There's a real obedience. You'll show up at the time I say it. It's almost like it's a place where that family member derives more power. I actually am so against that entire setup. I don't serve meals. I don't serve meals at a sit-down table with my children. We find alternative ways to sit down and do it, and do something else while we eat, so it doesn't have that hierarchical structure. That is how offensive I find that structure, and we have wonderful discussions and conversations. And like I said, it really screwed me up around food, even how weight, all of that, because of how anxious and fraught a space that dinner table was. That whole idea of how dare you waste the food I buy. But absolutely no willingness to say, oh, my daughter is eating a different way. Let me get to know her. Let me respect her. Let me have empathy for her. But instead, this was a story that was characterized by no empathy, lots of entitlement, lots of grandiosity, being drunk on one's own power, sort of this superficial need to make a childish petulant, tantrumy point by throwing away the utensils. It's his damn money. And then the triangulated structure that the mother's caught in it. I mean, mom doesn't have a fighting chance of making a healthy marriage out of this, but may have her own reasons. As we know, many survivors stay for a variety of reasons. Could be cultural, could be that she has other children, could be financial. He's the sole breadwinner, and this is another reason why that sole breadwinner model is a very, very risky one when you are dealing with a high conflict, antagonistic, difficult, or narcissistic partner. I feel for their daughter because, like I said, I felt actually as I read this was one of the few times I read one of these Am I the Assholes, and I actually felt physiologically triggered when I'd read it the first time. And then when I really stopped to think about what it must be like for this daughter to grow up in a house like this, and all she wants to do, I mean, you should be proud of a daughter who actually wants to learn to cook her own meals, become independent in that way, does her own grocery shopping, and that you can't celebrate that you expect your children to be these sorts of obedient, kinds of fearful people in your life. Not a good place to start. I'm sure many of you might resonate with this kind of a toxic dynamic. I was troubled by it, and it really makes my heart heavy to think of the hard path forward for not only for the daughter, the 15-year-old cooking daughter, but the remaining siblings and even the wife. So yeah, these are patterns that run deep and can affect everyone. And like I said, that dinner table, honestly, is one of the most toxic theaters that we can see in a narcissistic family system. This one is a doozy, okay? So here we go. Am I the asshole for telling my husband to stop inviting his mother to our daughter's performances? The situation is pretty frustrating, to say the least, but let's start with some context. So, my husband and I have a 13-year-old daughter. She plays piano and has participated in several plays in and outside of school. Now, here's the thing. My husband invites his mother to every performance our daughter has, not saying he shouldn't, but many times she'd put my daughter down and point out where she messed up and what she needed to work on. Hello, she's not even an expert in this. This happens every time. My daughter has picked up on those negative comments, and her self-esteem kept getting low, and by extension, her performances kept getting low as well. I told my husband his mother needs to either stop putting our daughter down or stop coming to the performances. He said his mother is the grandmother and should be included in these events as support. Enabler. Our daughter had a performance this past Wednesday. I told my husband that his mother can sit this one out, but he said it was too late because he sent her a link of the date and location of the event. I sighed and said nothing. His mom arrived like 20 minutes later, sat next to him, and kept pulling him close while whispering in his ear. I just rolled my eyes hard. Once the performance was over, and after we got a chance to see our daughter, who looked nervous and shaking, the mother-in-law looked at her and said, "Let me just say that today's performance was disappointing." I be slapping this bitch. My daughter was in shock, and I was floored completely. My daughter started crying, then rushed away. Mother-in-law then casually said, "Oh, I have to go now. I have an appointment with the salon for Chloe's, her other granddaughter's birthday party." I was fuming. I told her what she said to my daughter was not okay and that she made her upset. She said something along the lines of, I'm just telling it how it is," and then left. We went home and I lost it on my husband, telling him that his mother just keeps putting our daughter down and it's not right. He said I'm being overdramatic, gaslight, and what his mother's doing is just constructive criticism, minimization. I told him from now on he needs to stop inviting her to our daughter's performances. Good boundary. He said I was being ridiculous and that I shouldn't expect his mother to be excluded from her granddaughter's life like that. We had a big argument, and now my daughter isn't even interested in playing piano anymore. My husband said I was way out of line and shouldn't use our daughter in my fight with his mother. So husband's really manipulative. He also called me controlling and vicious. That's more of that gaslighting and pathologization of someone for setting a boundary. So she had some follow-up information about her story so people have more context. Number one, she said, my mother-in-law and I don't really talk due to past disagreements, which is not surprising. Number two, mother-in-law is uncomfortable with the concept of playing piano and thinks that my daughter is wasting time and getting distracted with zero benefits since she and my husband want her to become a doctor. My daughter actually doesn't want to become a doctor, but that's an argument for another time. She's 13, okay? She's 13. She's not about to go to medical school. Number three, my mother-in-law thinks I'm wasting my husband's money because I enrolled my daughter in piano classes and have been since she was 9. And number four, my husband told me he'll keep inviting his mother over and over and over again until I learn to stop using our daughter as a tool to fight his mother with. Believe me, I'm not. So, okay, as psychologists and therapists, we're never supposed to tell people to get a divorce. This is somebody where you almost whisper them out the door like, go, run away, get out, like slip them a note, like, damn. So much here. Everything we see about intergenerational cycles of abuse, mom and her callousness, her dismissiveness, her lack of empathy, her entitlement, her cruelty, the son, whether the son is a golden child or just completely out of his mind, he sounds very narcissistic himself. So he is able then to not hear his partner, his wife, and above all, his own child. This poor at 13 is a very vulnerable age. It really, really is. I think in some ways more vulnerable than younger childhood ages, because at 13 in puberty, so much is happening to a child in terms of hormones and other things that are changing in their body, right? Such a fragile age in many ways. And to do something like put yourself out there and perform and play the piano, which is technically not an easy thing to do, to not just support the kid, even if they're not playing right. I mean, we don't expect all of our children to be concert pianists. You know, most kids are just going to get as far as they get. And in fact, there's tons of research showing that actually learning to play an instrument like the piano and having music lessons is so good as part of academic growth, as, you know, sort of developing the brain more wholly. It makes a person a better student. So these people who at 13 are worried about this child going to medical school don't realize that her actually taking piano lessons is good for her. And they're making it sound like her doing, what does it say, that they're uncomfortable with the concept of playing piano? They're acting like this girl is spinning around a pole. She is playing the piano. And so it is this idea now, you see this happen in narcissistic family systems, that the child exists as an object to do what the narcissistic parent, which in this case is likely the father, and intergenerationally grandmother, want. They don't even have any interest in what this child's real interests and needs are. The mom is saying she has no interest in pursuing medicine. And you know what? If the poor kid even was interested in becoming a doctor, they have sufficiently destroyed that interest in her, because let me tell you, 13 is the front end of, yes, you're developing. In the middle of the teens, kids who are in these situations, it's not unusual for them to rebel. But the idea of the husband allying with the mother against the wife, triangulation 101, and he definitely buttered his bread on the wrong side. Any of these situations, your spouse, your partner, the person in theory you signed up to grow old with, he actually chose the wrong ally, because all things being equal, the mother should die before him. So it is that triangulation is likely a theme that carried from his earlier life. Interestingly, it sounds like her and mother-in-law have been going at it for a while. We know that in these narcissistic family systems, in-law relationships can sometimes be some of the most toxic kinds of narcissistic relationships that you've ever seen. It is unfathomable to me that a parent would ever degrade, humiliate, and devalue their child in a performative space. It is doubly surprising to me that a grandparent, who's often considered to be a little bit kinder and more beneficent, would do that to a child. And yet, here we are. And so the mother, though, and everyone's like, well, maybe the mother probably should set boundaries. She did set boundaries. I don't want her to come. And this guy is saying over and over and over, I'm going to have her come. Sometimes these relationships hit impasses. If this is what is coming up around piano lessons, I can all but guarantee there's 1,000 other things going wrong in this relationship. And this is actually a really good example for any of you who are in toxic marriages and long-term relationships and family systems relationships, of what is our true north? Remember, I talk about that concept of true north, that thing you will fight for. In many cases, it's your child. So that this woman is watching her child's ability to perform go away, running out of a room because of the criticism she's facing. And that statement that the grandmother made, it's like, I just tell it how it is. That is such narcissism speak. So many narcissists are like, I'm just a straight shooter. I just call it straight. I just tell it like how it is. That is their code for, I don't need to have empathy. And people buy that nonsense. And the challenge this woman has is her only path forward is to either to lie to the husband and not tell him about future recitals. And then what is that? That's not even a relationship anymore, right? I don't know these people's financial situation. I don't know anything else about them. But that idea that I'm just calling it how it is I hate that kind of narcissistic, nonsensical talk. And then walking away when the real hurt. So narcissistic people create messes and walk away from the emotional messes that they create. And that, and then further down on this one, I just want to find that spot, that him telling her that she's overly dramatic, classical example of gaslighting. She's having, and actually probably a very appropriate response. I'm just gauging this on myself. I'm not a particularly dramatic person, but if anyone dressed my child's performance down, I'm not violent. It would be all it would be all I could do to stop myself from slapping or hitting someone. I've never laid hands on anyone my whole life, but if someone went at my kids, it's the one place like I see red. And so the fact that he said she was being over dramatic, so he's a gaslighter, that what his mother is doing is constructive, is constructive criticism, is manipulative, and it's minimizing. And then she set a boundary. The mom can't come to the performances. He then tells her she's being ridiculous, criticism, gaslighting, minimization, and that I shouldn't expect his mother to be excluded from her granddaughter's life like that. Manipulation. At the face of it, it's unkind to say a grandparent should be excluded, but this grandparent hasn't earned being included. So he's not seeing it. It's like, again, many times you see these as intergenerational cycles. They're the grandparent. They can do what they want and say what they want, but that's how these cycles continue. Now the child isn't interested in playing anymore. The husband's telling her she's way out of line. Again, more of that narcissistic abuse, manipulation, and gaslighting. And shouldn't use our daughter in my fight with his mom. So he's projecting that triangulation theme. He's triangulated with his own mother, and now he's accusing his wife of triangulating with the daughter, which that's really mighty rich to be doing that. He also called her controlling and vicious. Narcissistic people do this all the time. When you try to set a boundary, you are called controlling. Again, video coming up on that too. But that idea that you actually say, no, this isn't going to work, and it's for very real reasons, then there's this idea that the person who set the boundary is controlling and even vicious. This is something that can often discourage people from setting boundaries in their relationship because a criticism and an accusation is leveled at them for something that's completely not true. You're clearly not controlling if all you're trying to do is protect a child. And that idea that when the narcissistic father in this case, and he sounds narcissistic to me, is that he wants his way of seeing the world, that willingness to let the child get destroyed because of some weird principle he has, very congruent with those self-righteous narcissistic patterns we see here. And then that idea that almost like that in your face, I'm going to keep inviting her. That to me is a call to arms. You know, this is one of those moments, like if I could say anything to this woman, it would be like, please get into therapy with somebody who understands narcissistic abuse. Don't have to tell anyone, but maybe even consult with an attorney and find out what it would mean in your state, because every state or country, I don't even know where this person is different in terms of how these things are handled. I don't know this person's culture, religion, any of that, so I know she may not have the luxury of being able to dissolve her marriage. But I also think it's critical that this woman have her daughter in therapy. To have been devalued and degraded repeatedly, again, at such an exquisitely important age,
by a grandparent and then have that be doubled down by the father. This child can see her father is choosing his own mother over his child. That child's going to internalize that. Starting therapy now is going to be important. And then finding ways, like, for example, maybe having the child play piano in school in a way where maybe, and those performances could happen in school with peers, or, as strange as this might sound, if the performances are getting to be too fraught, let the child have lessons, but they don't necessarily have to perform, just so they can enjoy it. But let me tell you, I was reading the comments. The comments are, they're as great as the stories. So number one, this person's not only not the asshole, it's actually, this seems to be actually a very, very clearly laid out story of narcissistic abuse. But my favorite comment is this. Next time you and your husband are intimate, roll over afterwards and say, "Let me tell you that tonight's performance was disappointing," and see how he likes that constructive criticism. Absolutely genius comment, but we all know what happens when the narcissist is ever faced with their own medicine. What do? They throw one of their tantrums and rage. This story actually really broke my heart, because as much as we're just sort of breaking it down line by line on a narcissism YouTube channel, somewhere out there, there was a 13-year-old girl who actually had an interest and a gift. And because of an irresponsible grandparent and an irresponsible parent, not only is her love of that craft being taken away, but with each day, she's growing more self-doubt. And to me, this is a real person's life, and that's absolutely devastating. So not only is not this poor mother the asshole, is that she has a really uphill battle when she has a partner and his family that are so hell-bent on living lives for their own egocentric needs, with absolutely no interest in cultivating, loving, and protecting a child in that system.
So this one says, am I the asshole for telling my parents that I didn't choose to have their kids and I will not make life easier for them once I move out? Okay. I am someone, I turn 18 in a few weeks, the person who writes this. I am counting down the days to getting out of my parents' house. They, however, have become so reliant on me that I know they are dreading the day and wishing they could legally prevent me from moving out. I'm their oldest child. They have 4 others, all under 10. My siblings have been put on me for a long time now. Even when I was their ages, it was expected that I would step up because I'm the oldest. It was both parentification and the old school thing of the oldest is expected to help because they were born first. Not all of it was parentification, but some of it sure was. We're talking about helping with homework, making sure they didn't kill each other, walking them to friends' houses, watching them while mom and dad ran errands. But you also had stuff like feed them lunch and or dinner when mom and dad weren't home, babysit overnight when they wanted to go to stuff, walk them to school once they started. I was told I needed to know how to change diapers and feed them as babies. That's the sort of stuff that happened a lot. I got some freedom, but for every afternoon that I could do whatever I wanted, I needed at least 3 weeks of work behind me. Over time, it became me being the one home more than them, and guilt trips laid at my feet if I wanted to do something, and my siblings wanted me to be home with them instead. And my parents saying I should treasure those moments while they want me like that. Damn. I'm pretty damn tired of it. I don't enjoy my siblings. Part of me wishes that they'd never been born, so I could at least have looked out for just myself and not have had to sacrifice so much. I don't feel like the benefits are there for me, and it's sad because most of my friends adore having siblings, while I'm left feeling it's a chore. I started saving some money when I was 14. My parents didn't know, but it can help me move out right as I turn 18. The topic of my birthday came up recently, and my parents came to me all, "You'll still come around, right? You'll still help take care of them, right? You still owe us, we're still your family," with that kind of stuff. I told them no, I wouldn't. They told me to think of the kids, if not them. That's when I said I didn't choose to have their kids and I wasn't going to keep making their life easier and my life more difficult, that I'll be gone and they'll have to figure out shit on their own. Am I the asshole? Okay. That's a powerful one, this one. Okay. First of all, no, this is to have this much responsibility. No, I understand that there may be sort of those rare stories out there where an 18-year-old was put in a position of maybe stepping up to care for younger siblings because of a tragedy. For example, that maybe there was foster care would get involved because there was an accident or something like that. So I can understand it. And even then, that's a really horrible, unfair circumstance. But you've got parents who just kept popping out kids and then assumed that they gave birth to their own nanny. That is not acceptable. So this person keeps using this terminology of parentification, right? So those of you not familiar with the term, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a parent, often a narcissistic parent or a narcissistic like a narcissism adjacent parent, who puts the child in a parental role. Now, it could be what we're seeing in this story, which is giving them roles like having to take care of the kids and change their diapers and put them to sleep and feed them and all of that. It can also be where the child is actually the parents are talking to them about things that you shouldn't talk to a child about, like relationship problems, or they're just relying on them like you would rely on another adult, or tell them about financial issues that are coming up in the family, or other things that a child is relatively powerless to address, but that would also leave a child or an adolescent feeling anxious because it sort of makes them feel a little less safe. So the parentification was clearly happening here, and that they had this expectation. But what this gets at, one thing that I felt like it came up a lot in this person's "am I the asshole" kind of query, is that we see this is a dynamic we see in a lot of narcissistic family systems. Remember, to narcissistic people, their children aren't children, they're accessories, right? They're a means to an end. In some cases, it's something they do to get societal validation because they feel like they're supposed to. In some cases, it's something they do that because when kids are babies, sometimes they're almost more of a source of supply. Like, see all these people sort of carrying their little babies around as accessories. But ultimately, they're really not. I mean, a narcissistic parent is really not interested in doing the heavy lifting of caregiving. And I can tell you this, and I say this as a parent, raising children is absolutely tedious, especially if you're actually doing it yourself. I don't mean people who off-source the work. I mean, if you're actually in there doing the work of raising your own kids, it is absolute tedium. So to put this on a kid who was, in early adolescence all the way through is an absolutely terrible thing to do. And one of the things, for example, this person's mentioning is sometimes they were taking care of the child, according to their report, while the parents would kind of go out and do the stuff they wanted, even all night. Yeah, no, not okay. You chose to have 4 children under the age of 10. Either you pay for a proper sitter or you don't get to have a night out. And I think that the willingness to see their eldest child in such an objectified, obligatory role is a real problem. But what's really problematic is how they manipulated it. Oh, you're going to hurt your siblings. You owe us. You owe us should be the coat of arms or the motto of every narcissistic family out there. You owe us. No, don't owe you anything. When you have a child, the child owes you nothing. It is a one-sided contract where you brought this child into the world and your job is to raise them so they can go off and live their own lives as an independent person, not to remain an indentured servant to the parents for the end of time. Though that's how many narcissists view it. And obviously those helper children and those scapegoat children often get roped into that role. What's extraordinary to me, I got to tell you, what's extraordinary to me about this "am I the asshole"? Not only are they not an asshole, they're actually a bit of a superstar, because at 18, they've already woken up to, like, I'm not doing this. And they had the sense to set aside the money and try to get out. It's so sad to think about how unnurtured this adolescent it has been and has to figure this out for themselves. But it's actually quite extraordinary for an 18-year-old to set such a boundary and say, I'm out, and you're not going to manipulate me with my siblings who I didn't ask to care for. And even you hear some of those themes of grief, that somebody would say, I really envy those family systems where I have friends who have siblings and they like their siblings because they're not their primary caregiver. And that's the role that these parents put the child into. Adolescent is a child that they put their child into and continue to manipulate them to remain in the role. In my many years of working with people who come up through family systems like this as eldest children and had these disproportionate caregiving responsibilities put on them. And yet, while even sometimes a child would say, I get it, my parent was working, but then they said, then it was excessive because, listen, the parent would come home, I had been at school all day, and the parent was still expecting me to take this role, that some of these folks would actually join the military because it was just a hard out. They would graduate high school, then they would show, they would show up for training within a few weeks after that. And then they had no say over where they would be, where they would be shipped off to. So it really almost forced their hand to get away from the family, but that's obviously not for everyone. So I have to say that this 18-year-old is actually showing a lot of people how to set a boundary. And it doesn't feel good. You cannot tell me that for an 18-year-old child, it's either easy or even feels even passably okay that they want to go ahead and set this boundary and distance from these younger siblings that have gotten reliant on them, but to say, this isn't my problem. I didn't give birth to these children. This is your problem. Go out there and do what everyone else does. Pay for childcare. But what the narcissistic family system is so good at doing is manipulating people, playing on that sense of shame as though you've done a bad thing for pushing back on an inappropriate ask. In this particular case, it's caregiving responsibilities. In other family systems, it might be things like money. So somebody's struggling, but the parents are still, or the family system is still leaning on them. Why aren't you giving us more money? Why aren't you sending us more money? And, oh, I guess you don't really care about the family, is almost that card that people can play. I mean, I have also heard numerous accounts of people who were put in these heavily caregiving parentified roles who go into adulthood and say, I can promise you the one thing I'm never going to do is have children, because they just don't want those responsibilities again. So I think that this particular tale, actually in a very plaintive, kind of sad, profound way, speaks to this experience that this 18-year-old had, stepped up and did, which actually I tip my hat off to also that is not easy, and then said, enough is enough. And in a very, very sort of planful way, set aside the money to get out. And the parents sensing that not only their supply, but their sort of helper child is getting away, is trying to put every form of manipulation in the sense of, you owe us, on top of this child to try to suck them back into the system. I have a real problem with that. In fact, you should drop in the comments, any of you who have ever been played in that way, where a family system, once you really started setting boundaries and saying, I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore, you were told that you owe them, you owe them, you owe them. Because no, I am sorry. In my handbook, children do not owe parents unless you have, as an adult, entered into some sort of contractual relationship. You borrow a large sum of money and it's understood you owe them that money back. But anything for a minor child, that's part of the job, and we do not expect to get paid back. So not only is this 18-year-old not an asshole, they may very well be offering a masterclass in how to set boundaries, the grief that's involved, the manipulation of narcissistic systems, the importance of looking ahead and planning, and the fortitude of actually holding your ground. So from the mouths of babes, I guess. So that's this week's. And whoever that 18-year-old is out there who did this, hats off to you. I'm sorry that was your childhood. Like I said, I think that being in family systems, when it's done right, it can be joyful if everyone can sort of pitch in and you learn reciprocity and mutuality. But in toxic family systems, unfortunately, especially toxic parents, they will suck and suck and suck and view their kids as nothing more than supply.
This person says, my 10th anniversary is coming up and my kids are getting old enough to be a pain in the butt regarding our single bathroom. I've been saving up, and for my 10th anniversary, I'm getting a bathroom installed in the basement. I'm going all out, well, as all out as I can afford. I'm getting a 2-person tub with jets, in-floor heating, and a heat lamp so my wife can dry off and stay warm. Anyways, the issue is that my brother is having money problems. He called me and asked if I could spare any money to help him out. He has a tendency to live beyond his means. We have similar jobs and salaries, but he has a huge house with 3.5 bathrooms. He drives a $150,000 truck that he will never use to tow, haul, or go off-road with. His wife's engagement ring costs as much as my motorcycle. My family lives in a bungalow my wife and I bought. It was built in 1956, and it is cozy for us and 2 kids. But my mom constantly compares our lifestyles. She loves showing people pictures of his Christmas decorations and stuff, and she shares his vacation pictures, that sort of thing. The bathroom budget is $25,000, but it will probably go higher when the contractor starts working. My mom is backing him up. She says that I don't spend any money, so I should have some saved to help out family. She is saying he might have to sell his truck or downsize his home. I told her that's not my problem. He makes a little more than I do a year, so he should have savings too. She said that he needs to have a big house so he can entertain since he wants to climb up the ladder. That might just be my interpretation. I don't want to lend him money and watch him waste it and disappoint my wife. She deserves a bathroom where she can take long baths without the kids or me interrupting to use the toilet. I could cut corners and lend him some money, but I really don't want to do that, even if it means he has to sell his stuff. So this is one on family entitlement, right? So it's interesting because the brother is entitled and unself-aware enough to think that the sibling who makes a little less than him and clearly seems to be living well within their means would underwrite the lifestyle of their entitled, large truck driving, large home having, large wife engagement ring having lifestyle. Now, certainly people and families do ask each other for money, right? It's already an uncomfortable enough dynamic. But this is where you see that triangulated dynamic in a family that could have started when you were kids and all the way up. So mom is a real toxic play here, right? Mom is saying, you got to give him money, otherwise he's going to have to suffer. No thought to you. That dude's got 3.5 bathrooms. And what this person wants to do on his 10th anniversary is actually very healthy. It's like exactly the kind of gift to me that is emblematic of what we see in a healthy relationship. Recognizing a need and trying to make, in this case, his wife's life a little easier by letting her have a place just to do something as simple as take a bath and just having a different place for people to use the toilet. Like, get the second bathroom. Like living with one bathroom, people do it all the time. But when you have kids and the kids are getting older, it definitely creates friction that if they could address, great for them, it's a thoughtful gift. But in certain families, and again, it sounds like the brother with the big house and the big truck and the big this and the big that is the golden child, right? And mom is literally saying, and this guy, I don't know if he's necessarily even the scapegoat, may even just be the invisible child, like, you don't have any needs, you don't matter, but your golden child brother, how could you not want him to have everything? And oh my goodness, can you believe he can actually have to give stuff up? The mom is probably saying this without any awareness of it being said. These are the moments, so we learn where setting a boundary and setting a need can be a game changer in these kinds of toxic systems. What none of us get in a narcissistic family system is that moment where we put our foot down and everyone's like, well, you know what? Good for you for finally setting a boundary. No. You don't get to be viewed as the nice, go with the flow, conciliatory, you don't get to be viewed as that easy person anymore. Now you're the difficult one, right? That's the nature of the gaslighting in a narcissistic family system. The first time you put down a real boundary, like, no, I'm not giving, Mr. Spendy here any more money so he can just probably go throw it all away to have his big entertaining happening in his home, that I'm not doing that anymore. Well within this person's rights. It's not like the brother is struggling financially and it's some sort of emergency. It's just that the brother is spoiled and doesn't want to curtail his spending. But the moment you set down that very clear, like, I'm not doing this anymore, you now really you're already viewed in, whether it's a scapegoated, helper, invisible child role, you're already being viewed in a subordinate, subjugated role. But if you speak out, now you're the bad one. And it can feel like from that point forward, you're always going to be viewed as the person who's difficult. You're the one who's selfish. You're the one who's bad. You're the person who does bad things. It's hard to live with that when that's not your identity. That you're not a bad person, you're not a selfish person, you're actually a very reasonable person who's about to make a good investment in your home. If these people ever sell this house, having the second bathroom is going to be a real asset. And if they intend to stay in that house and their kids grow up and get into adolescence, and it's a good investment. They're doing something, and it's not as though these people are living in a way that's extravagant. And you know what? None of that matters. They could be living extravagantly. It's their damn money. But this idea that people in the family system actually have to sacrifice in the name of the anointed, special, entitled, golden child person by the parent who has long been a triangulator is unacceptable. But what we have to start doing is being okay, because in some ways, if you're being viewed as selfish and awful and whatever else way this family is going to view this guy, entitled for not giving his brother a loan, you got to get okay with that you're not viewed as the nice one. Because really, when you're viewed as the nice person by a narcissistic person, that's actually code for thanks for making it so easy for me to be entitled and get whatever I want. That's really what that means. So be very aware when toxic people, selfish people, entitled people are calling you the nice, easy one, because what it really means is that you've capitulated so much that it's not good for you. So I'm really happy for this guy. I'm happy for his bathroom. I hope it comes in under budget, and I hope his wife has a fantastic time in her heated floor, wonderful warm bathtub. Those little things go a long way. They've earned it. And you know what? The brother can figure it out. If the brother can figure it out, maybe he can pawn off the wife's ring, do whatever the hell he needs to do. But his brother is not there to serve his needs, which is what we all end up doing in narcissistic relationship, subjugating our needs in favor of what? The difficult, toxic, I don't know if his brother's narcissistic, that's a speculation. I'm talking about in general, but what the selfish, egocentric, entitled people in our lives want. Thanks again.